Hey, welcome to the Toyota Bassmaster Studios. Welcome to our Winning Ways show. Tommy Sanders here with Mark Zona, and you know what Winning Ways is all about. We break down those victories, which are so precious on the Bassmaster Elite Series. Plus, at this particular show, we'll also talk about the World Championship, the Geico Bassmaster Classic presented by Dick's Sporting Goods. New year for the Elite Series, lots of new elements, new dimensions in place here, and we couldn't have started out with two more different tournaments, especially the barn burner that we kicked it off.
Exactly right, and here's the one thing that you're going to get from this Winning Ways show is diversity on how to catch them and catch pretty much giants this entire show in really three bodies of water, whether it's the St. John's, Lake Lanier, all the way to the headwaters of the Tennessee River in Knoxville, Tennessee at the Bassmaster Classic. You want to learn about catching them? Today's for you.
All right, we'll have the winners for you, and we'll see just how they got it done, and we'll start with the St. John's River.
Yes, got your big butt. Woo!
Ha ha ha! How's that to start your morning?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes, sir.
That's how you start the 2019 Bassmaster Elite Series. Woo!
The big ones are always there in the St. John's, but they never came in like they did this week for the Bassmaster Elite Series. And at the end of it all stood the legend Rick Clunn. Back-to-back St. John's wins. He's standing by with Mark Zona for our Skeeter Boats Taste the Bait.
Rick Clunn, big tournament on the St. John's River, and what's amazing is kind of going through your selection of baits through the tournament. A lot of folks at home, you think, wow, that was the bait to use. There was actually a different lure that led you into the tournament where you found these giants.
Yeah, in practice, the water temperatures were in the mid to high 50s, okay, which is not prime for the fish to move in unless they're in the spring at the St. John's. So I like to search, especially in cold water, pre-spawn, I like to search for my fish with a faster bait. And of course, there's no better bait than a lipless bait that time of year, shallow water, potential grass. You can cover a lot of that. And actually, I got my confidence in this area with big fish throwing, which is called Hail Mary, that I designed for Lucky Strike. And it's essentially, you know, like a spinnerbait. Everybody says it's just another spinnerbait. No, it's not. It's got a blade that it really does attract big fish. Just another lipless crankbait. No, it's not. This is a half-ounce profile, but it's a 1-ounce bait. And you say, well, why do you do that? Because I've always loved lipless crankbaits to locate fish, because it allows me to do what I do in the old days, cover a lot of water until I get in a potential area that I think may have potential. Then you maybe change the baits that really would catch them better. And I did. I caught a 6 and one pushing 10 in practice out on the ends of docks in that colder water, and I was throwing the Hail Mary.
As the tournament really started, that's when the spinnerbait started to transpire.
Yeah, and actually in practice, what I was doing, I was working the docks, the whole dock, because you got to say, okay, I don't know where the fish, what part of the dock these fish are using in 56-degree water, okay? So I'm working the whole dock, and on the ends I caught a 6, and then I caught eventually that 10 on the Hail Mary. It's the 1-ounce Hail Mary. But I was also, I was still going around backside, and I was still working the dollar pads, and I had 2 bites on a spinnerbait that day that I found these fish in the dollar pads. And that gives me a little bit of confidence in the spinnerbait. I never even picked up a worm. I didn't pick up a worm until the final day of practice, and I caught 1 fish doing it. But I knew that worm, because you know Florida, that worm is going to play a big role if they move shallow. And sure enough, it did. In the first 2 days, I probably caught 4 or 5 of my keepers were on the old ditto gator tail worm, and which you know is notorious for that. And the good thing about the worm, I do want to point something out. We don't have one because I was biting off a 6-inch worm down to about 4 inches the final day to even have one to use. Is that it's got a curly tail, but that gator tail's stiff, and when you pitch it into reeds or something, it doesn't grab the reed. You know, like a real curly tail will grab the reed. This is real efficient for Florida fishing reeds and that type of habitat. So only in the final 2 days when we got some wind and cloud cover did I really then start seeing the spinnerbait become more active. And the real key was it was producing quality fish.
See what got him? Trailer hook. That was a dangerous swing on my part too, because where he's hooked at, it could at least easily ripped out.
The last time you won there, you won with a bladed jig. In water that, it looked similar as far as the environment, some eelgrass, some dollar pads, stuff like that. Why did you go this time around a spinnerbait and not a bladed jig? Because throughout the event, I remember saying with Tommy, he'll turn, he'll throw that bladed jig.
Mainly because the bladed jig, and I still don't know why I lose to me fishing. Okay, and even after I won in 2016, I said I should have thrown a spinnerbait, because I rarely ever lose a fish on a spinnerbait. And so going back here, I did have a bladed jig tied on every day, but I didn't see any better results coming from it strike-wise than the spinnerbait, and I'm just much more confident that when a fish hits a spinnerbait, I'm gonna put him in the boat than I am a bladed jig.
Well, he hit it right at the boat. I was hoping he had the right hook. Mine's over 6. I haven't been getting many bites on this bait, but every one of them's been 5 or better. Like I said, the second biggest bass I caught it in Florida. I ever caught in Bassmaster Classic. Only second to Preston Clark's 11 something. On the same day, matter of fact, I caught a 10-12 on the same bait in Toho.
What was it like catching those giants on that spinnerbait? Somebody sitting at home just seeing that footage, what was it like when they bit it?
It was, you know, it was my favorite way to catch them. It's a slow motion process. You know, it's all of a sudden you're looking at the spinnerbait coming through the dollar pads, and all of a sudden you see this beast come up behind it, and he's not going. Even though you know he's moving full speed, he's not. He's boom, and you know he's got it. I mean, when he eats it, you know he's my fish, and it's just probably a lot of people enjoy it topwater. That's my favorite strike.
That's your gig.
Yeah.
I know a crankbait has served me well in my career, but I can't, I think I even enjoy a spinnerbait bite more than a topwater. I know they're not going in slow motion, but when they come up and get it, it looks like they are, and it's like a topwater. You get to see the strike. That one's 4 3/4, maybe 5.
The Bassmaster Elite Series Winning Ways is brought to you by Humminbird, Minn Kota, Talon, and by Mercury.
It is our Bassmaster Elite Series Winning Ways show. Right now we're breaking down the very first tournament for this 2019 season, the St. Johns River in Florida. This tournament, all about big bass, gave a lot of anglers a big chance to shine. How about our Dick's Sporting Goods Rookie of the Year race? On top of this race, at this point, South Carolina, young Patrick Walters leading a heavy, talented field.
Comes from America right there, cuz.
With authority, Patrick Walters. At this point in the season, young Patrick Walters also finds himself atop this list. Toyota Bassmaster Angler of the Year, that all-important points race. Again, a great talented field, including Scott Canterbury right behind him, Stetson Blaylock, Drew Cook, also another Floridian in that race, and of course from Canada, the Johnston brothers. Now back to our tournament winner, Rick Clunn.
I got to call you out on something, okay? I've grown up, and everybody else, you know, in the Bassmasters has grown up listening to pattern fishing, finding how they're biting on something, and then doing it all over a body of water. Yet, you told me that over 90% of your wins have been in one area. That totally goes against pattern fishing.
Yeah, and of course there's, you know, and the pattern, the way what I described there, and again, it's been something in this reinvention of myself for the last 6-7 years. I've had to restudy myself and how I won in the past and how I established patterns. And all of a sudden, what I saw popping out by just looking at wins was that more often than not, I wasn't running a pattern that was all over the lake, okay? And it's maybe where I should have stated better. I've found that most of my wins come staying in a generally the same area and running a little pattern within there, a pattern within a pattern within that area, but I'm not really running all over the lake. And what you're doing when you run all over the lake is you're taking yourself a lot of times out of the big fish at the wrong time, because the big fish are only going to feed for a small window most of the time during the day. And if you're running all over the lake, you may not be there when that happens. So to catch these bigger strings, which now I've learned, I'm getting where I'm better at, you know, 30-plus pound strings. I've caught now 4 or 5 of them in the last 5 years, which I hardly ever did in my early career, and with bigger limits even. So now I'm really trying to lock down into smaller areas where I think the big fish are and be there when they bite.
Oh. That's a toad.
So that one way.
9 to 10, but when they get that big, I lose track.
One of the things that you said coming into this tournament, you cannot get, which is exactly what you're saying. In the state of Florida, you said you cannot get caught behind your steering wheel of your boat.
No, that, and you can't have your foot on the troll motor all day, which I cannot. My muscle memory just refuses to obey my mind and says, get your foot off the troll motor. So thank goodness. I mean, literally, I do. I bury the power post in the ground, where I used to would blow through an area and take me, you know, 5 minutes to get through the area. Now it's going to take me 30. Because I'm going to blow through and I'm going to dissect the area, because I know the big fish are here. And then move a little bit, put the power post down. I did it in this tournament. I don't know that we have it on camera, but I moved 10 yards to put the power post down, especially when I was in the dollar patch with that spinnerbait. Moved 10 yards, put the power post down. I mean, I wasn't making 3 casts in that area, I was making 15 casts in that area.
Holy crap.
During the break, real quick, we have to slow motion this real fast. You had one of those giant, St. John's River freaks, and you grabbed the line, and I was watching you, and you said, what? Like Denny Brower would have absolutely thrown a coffee at the TV grabbing the line, and I heard you make a comment when you grabbed the line.
I do, but I've learned also that having a rod up here and reaching for a fish here, you're having to control the rod from 6 to 8 feet away from where the fish is. You're having to control that fish from there. Where if I grab the line, now you got to be smart about it. You got to be willing to let the line go through your hand when you make that run, like a drag would work for you. But now I only have 2 to 3 feet of distance that I have to control that. It really, even though it looks terrible, it's much more efficient in hand landing a fish.
You've done everything. You have done everything there is. You've done so much for this sport. I got to ask you this. What is the one thing that when you're alone that you're like, I got to get this done before the end of my career doing this?
I don't really have that kind of thought process. And more often than not, I'm asked, how long do you continue to do this? And I hate that question, but it's basically, when I go on the water and I leave the shore and I leave everything that surrounds the shoreline, all the business and the politics and all of that, I revert to being 29 to 30 years old. In my mind, I'm 29 to 30 years old, and I'm playing the greatest video game of all. Every day that video game changes. Every day I've got to figure out, how it's going to work. What are the fish doing? Fishing is the last remaining vehicle for humanity in this country to stay connected to the outdoors, for the masses. There's no vehicle left, and if we lose that connection to the outdoors, we're going to lose ourselves. And I know that because I'm out there every day. And so to me, that's what's still the most important thing about what I do. And it's to transfer that process to this young high school generation and this young college generation. Yeah, we love to catch fish and we love to do all that, but you need to realize that you are the ones who are going to maintain that connection. It's so important to maintaining what we call the wild.
We're going to find out who wins this. A living legend, or somebody who I honestly believe is a future legend. He needs 23 pounds, 2 ounces, 19 pounds, 5 ounces. Rick Clunn is your champion for the 16th time. Rick Clunn gets it done.
Well, there he is, the legend Rick Clunn, and a repeat victory on the St. Johns River. When we come back, we'll go to a very different looking place, Lake Lanier, that spotted bass factory in Georgia. We'll see a first-time winner on the Bassmaster Elite Series. Connecticut's Paul Mueller taking the big win not too far from Atlanta, Georgia. That's when we return on the Bassmaster Elite Series Winning Ways show.
Started the day with 51 pounds, 9 ounces, looking for 17.8. 16 pounds and 9 ounces!
The winning moment on Lake Lanier, so different from the St. Johns River in that so much of this tournament played out in deep water, and it would be first-time Bassmaster Elite Series winner Paul Mueller hosting that blue trophy for the first time.
My strength is deep, and that's really how I thought you could win this tournament, was fishing deep. So in practice, I really wanted to establish the depth of water. What I've learned over the years is that fish are a lot spookier than you think. One thing that was really helpful for me was the Garmin Lakeview HD mapping. They have surveyed that lake, and so it's 1 foot contour shoreline to shoreline. Along with their depth shading, I could set up my map to highlight that zone, 26 to 45 foot. And then it was just establishing what those fish would relate to. Any blueback herring lake that I've been to, when the water's cold like that, it's a ditch deal play sometimes. It didn't play as much as I thought it may, but I caught the majority of my fish on the first day off a deep ditch. Day one, I caught all my fish on a 3-inch Rains Bubbling Shaker, 3/16 ounce Do It Molds freestyle jig. This is a jig head that I actually made, which basically it's kind of like a fat aspirin head. So it's got flat sides. What that does is it allows that bait to kind of have a unique rocking action. It's the same type of jig head that I like with a hair jig. I thought that this was my deal. You hit close to the boat too. I don't know if they're following it or... No, they're right under the boat. I see one about 10 feet behind me. I'd fire that bait and I'd keep it above them, just the same way I crappie fish. but they just move a little bit faster than crappie. And you just keep it above them and you just shake it in place. And they'd come right up to it and eat it. So it was like video game fishing away from the boat. First day, that little 3-inch Rains bubbling shaker, 3/16 ounce, do-it molds, freestyle jig. That's a size 1 Mustad 32 746 hook. 10-pound Gamma torque braid, 6-pound Gamma edge fluorocarbon long leader. You see the knots here, so it's, you know, probably 13, 14 foot leader. Lew's Custom Pro Speed Spin 2000 spinning reel.
Oh boy. Start today with 34.15, needs 14.12, 15 pounds, 9 ounces, and the former Bass Nation national champion is your brand new leader with 50 pounds and 8 ounces.
The third day, I didn't, you know, it was my lowest day of weight. I had like 15 and change, and they're just, the big ones weren't there.
Number 1.
That'll work. Good for morale. They're small. That's a small one. We'll take them. Take them, but they got to grow up. But there's a lot of fish here. I haven't caught many small ones here, though. The one thing that I notice about these fish is A, they're boat shy, even in depths of, you know, 40+ foot of water, which is amazing. I would get 30 feet to that school, I'd spook them. I would never graph an area. I would drop the trolling motor, I'd look at my map, my Lakeview HD mapping, and I'd know that they were spooky, and, you know, I'd back off with the swim bait. And if I didn't get bit within 5 or 10 minutes, I'd kind of get closer and scan around. If they weren't there, I'd move. There's some good ones here. There's not as many here as some of the other places. That's kind of how it is. A lot of places just kind of a couple fish, but they're the right kind. But they should bite if I get a swim bait in front of them. But they are moving a lot, so. Small one, I think. Envision this, right? You got a school of fish right here. Some of these schools, there were 20, 30 plus fish, right? You throw that bait through them, and how do you know exactly? I didn't know. Hey, I see ya. That's the right kind. I knew there was a school somewhere there based off the mapping. There was a sweet spot. Barely hooked. Thank you, Lord. Number 5. And that one, if we got to call that one, that's a good thing, but it's a nice fish. But what I would do is I'd keep my boat out off of them. I'd hit the spot lock on the Ultrex. And what I would do is I would do it in increments, like that. I'd take 5 or 10 casts, then I'd move in about 10, 15 yards. That's a spot. And I'd do different angles. So eventually, when you got that first fish, you're like, oh, the school's there. And if you could get that fish, put it in a live well, and throw another cast before they move, you'd catch 2 or 3 fish. And sometimes you'd have to reset. Maybe, maybe not. I think so. These are one of them short, fat ones. They'd follow it, they'd start pecking at it. So you have a school of fish and one would grab it, but he wouldn't commit to it. And they're like smallmouth. The more they start competing over it, the more they fire up. And you'd feel that tap, 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 and then one would just pile drive it. Homemade, do-it molds, herring head underspin, style 111, Gamakatsu. That's the best hook for a swim bait, in my opinion.
When we return, we'll take a closer look at Paul's switch to that custom swim bait rig, which would prove to be the winner.
The Bassmaster Elite Series Winning Ways is brought to you by Nitro Boats, Abu Garcia, Berkeley, Triton Boats.
Bassmaster Winning Ways breaking down the second stop of the season for the Bassmaster Elite Series 2019, Lake Lanier. Now winner Paul Mueller would break down this spot, which played so big for him on our Yamaha Unlock the Lake.
My main spot was essentially, it was a ridge. It was started as like an underwater point, topped out to about 26. It dipped to about 45. Those fish were in that saddle. The mapping helped me tremendously, and that live scope Panoptics helped me. And the thing was, it not only helped me to find them, but it helped me to stay on them day after day.
They're down there. They're just real finicky. I've seen a bunch of them. I don't know if they'll still be there or whatever, but man, they're just real picky on what they want. There's like 4 or 5 of them up there, and they are so finicky. Hopefully it's a little bit bigger, but man, I tell you, finicky.
What that thing will show you, it's tough to discipline yourself to stay away from them, but I learned that I spooked a lot of fish, you know, as that tournament went on. I said, you know what, I just need to fish the swim bait. Find those areas, those points, ridges, humps, in the right depth of water, and back off them and throw that swim bait, slow roll off the bottom, and you'll catch those fish.
Number 1.
How big?
Probably 2.5, I'm gonna guess. Good start.
The bread and butter bait for day 2 through 4 was the Rains 3 1/4 inch fat rock 5 shad, bluegill color as well. 1/2 ounce Do-It molds, herring head, underspin without the blade. Some guys are using lighter jig heads. The thing is this, I didn't think it really mattered as much. These fish were, if you got it in front of them, they'd eat it. So I wanted something that would maintain bottom contact in deeper water easier, and I could fish it a little bit faster. If I fished a 1/4 or a 3/8 ounce, you just have to fish it that much slower, and it just takes so much time per cast, especially in 45 foot of water, that I felt like I was more efficient with the 1/2 ounce size.
Yeah! 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 That's the kind we need right there. That's the biggest fish I caught all week. How about that for a Lake Lanier spot? Thank you, Lord.
What I like about this jig head, it's got a flat head, so the swim bait is also flat. So what happens is that bait just kind of rolls side to side. It's got a really good death roll to it. The other thing I like about this particular mold is that you're able to use that little bit oversized hook. That hook really can't come too far past that second joint, otherwise it'll mess up the action. So this is the biggest hook that I can get away with in a mold, is a 3/0 Gamakatsu Style 11 Jig 90 hook. As far as a swim bait hook goes, when you hook them, you own them.
Look at this. That's pretty cool, huh? Let this fish go. Bluegill. I guess they don't just eat blueback herring. They eat whatever they want. Pretty cool. Problem is these fish aren't on the bottom, so it's not, if they're on the bottom, I catch them every cast. Because these fish are moving, they're curious to the boat, but they get spooked once they're under it. But there's several fish here, and it's just a matter of, making the right cast. Thank you, Lord.
Basically what I was doing with it is I was slow rolling it off the bottom. The final day especially, they were suspended. I could have had a really big bag that day, I feel. I mean, there was a potential to have a really big bag there, but those fish were 15 feet off the bottom, but to see that was amazing, but it was frustrating too, because I figured I needed, 20 plus pounds, but I guess it was enough.
16 pounds and 9 ounces!
Well, in the end, hard fought and a victory for Paul Mueller, his first on the Bassmaster Elite Series. This pro from Connecticut with all the deep water skills, and he used them all this week. When we come back, we'll take a look inside the World Championship of Fishing.
Your 2019 Geico Bassmaster Classic champion, the pride of Knoxville,
Well, welcome back to
Tennessee.
it, our Winning Ways show. And I guess right now, if we want to break down the #1 win of the season so far, or the #1 win of the season, period, let's get the winner in the seat. DeFoe, thank you so much for spending a little time with us here today. We'd like for you to take us through it all, but let's set it up before we go through each of the 3 days there.
Yeah.
I mean, used to be you couldn't be a hometown or a home state person to win a classic.
Right.
We know that's changed over the past year. But
Yeah.
you're the true home. I mean, you're the Knoxville guy.
That's right.
You're the son of the city of Knoxville.
Yeah.
And added to that, you are the favorite, the pick of the pundits to win this thing. So that's a little bit of pressure right there.
Yeah, it definitely was. You know, having lived there my whole life, and I mean, fished right here where we put in at, Tommy. I mean, that was one of our favorite places this time of the year to go put in and go catch a bunch of white bass. You know, up here in the upper end of the Tennessee, and then in the French Broad and Holston Rivers right here. So to say I have fished this water since I started fishing, and that I fished it a lot would certainly be an understatement.
And we look at these pictures of these crowds, these record-setting crowds at the takeoff there.
Yes.
We know we're in DeFoe country, and we're in bass fishing country. This place is one of the centers, one of the world headquarters for bass fishing.
It absolutely is. I mean, there's tons of people around here, right here, within an hour that bass fish. But the great thing is with Knoxville, it's all really close, really centrally located. You got I-40, you got I-75. They come right through here. Really easy to get a lot of different places from Knoxville, Tennessee.
Absolutely. And we talk about the pressure being the hometown favorite.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, forget everything's going on in the world of fishing. You only get so many shots in your
That's
lifetime
right.
at a classic.
Yes.
And a shot at a classic on your home waters is like, it's a gift, but again, it ratchets up the pressure just a little.
It does, you know, and that's the one thing that I can say that worked for me as far as that goes is the fact that I've got to fish a lot of tournaments at home. You know, you make a top 12 or something in that. Understanding how to manage that pressure, and when you get out on the water, the rest of that stuff doesn't matter. That's one anyway.
Let's take us through the first day.
Okay.
Couldn't have gone a whole lot better, could it?
It really couldn't have. You know, on paper it looked excellent, but it really couldn't have went much better. I got 5 quality bites. I landed all 5 of them. 3 of those were keeper smallmouth. It's got to be a minimum of 18 inches. And I also had a 6-pound largemouth. And I had a few people, you know, interviews and stuff ask me coming into this event, what could you do that could win this tournament for you? And I said it was catching a big one.
Oh, it's a big one. Stay on there, baby. Just please stay on there. Oh, yeah! Woo! Yeah, baby! Yes! Dang it, that feels so good. Dude, that's the kind of fish right there. That is a difference maker.
It's like you get to weigh in an extra fish, an extra 3-pounder. So, you know, that definitely really can separate you from the rest of the field by catching that one big one in this tournament.
Great quality, no big numbers on that first day.
Yeah.
We looked at your spot, we watched these places you were fishing, and Davey Hyde had been out with you on practice. He says, these places look like nothing. They don't look like, you know, break it down.
Yes.
What was special about these spots?
What was going on under the water on the majority of places where I caught my fish they were very shallow, number one. And I think that had to do with the fact the water had been so dirty for so long. We'd had huge rains that dumped a lot of water in the system and really got it dirty. So those bass were up extremely shallow, 1.5 to 3.5 foot deep. Actually, the 6-pounder I caught, that really flat, shallow point, I'm sitting in 3.2. throwing towards the bank with that Arashi Vibe Lipless crankbait and catch the biggest fish that I caught in the tournament. Really one of the shallowest ones, and certainly the furthest away from 5 or 7 feet of water. A lot of the places where I caught the smallmouth, those type of places were, you know, I may be sitting in 5 or 7, but 15 foot's right behind me. Okay. You know, so there is deeper water close by. But those fish they were right up on that stuff. And the reason they were up there was because they were feeding it primarily on big gizzard shad. You'd see big gizzard shad flip around every now and again, especially either when that south wind was kicking in on those places. Sometimes when it was flat still, you'd see them up there. It was just really hard to get those fish to bite then.
You know, if you poll the anglers who were in it in the classic, only about 95% of them said it was going to be one cranking. So you'd be called a traitor if you didn't win it, at least doing some cranking. thinking. Anything
Exactly.
else in the mix on day one that really worked for you?
Day one, it was the lipless crankbait, that Storm Arashi vibe. I weighed in 4 of my fish on that. And that's, you know, I weighed in 3 smallmouth on that first day, and then the 6-pounder. And I weighed in a largemouth about 4 on a Rapala DT4, dark brown crawl color. And that's what's funny is I'm telling you that the fish were eating gizzard shad, but everything I'm throwing is a crawdad color.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they were eating on crawfish some, you know, but the gizzards is what you would see, and I think certainly what kept them around those areas.
Yeah, we had people tell us there's not that big a crawfish population in that river there. But
Yeah, to my knowledge, I'm sure there's some, but it doesn't seem to be a lot. And that was, somebody asked me, like, what's the best thing you can imitate a gizzard shad with? And I said, well, apparently a red lipless crankbait.
Who knows? Figure that one out.
20 pounds even! 20 pounds and a brand new Geico Daily Leader in DeFoe!
We go to day 2 and everything changes.
It did. You know, that first day we had a nice south wind, fairly warm conditions. Second day, much cooler and a north wind. You know, it's the front has now shifted. We're on the back side of it. That north wind really pushing it out. But yeah, that second day, the morning, I decided to start in a different place. A really good barge, got a good flat back behind it where a lot of fish will spawn, and hit 2 or 3 places out in front of it. And as I'm working through those, kind of come around the corner, on a good little turn up there, a couple 2.5 foot deep or so with that lipless. One thumps it, catch it, 3.5 pound largemouth or a little bit better.
Right there is the way you want to see them eat it. Check that out. Suck that thing in. Yes, thank you, Lord. Man, that's a good start.
Work around on the next kind of little tip out there, catch another, just a keeper, but hey, I've got another fish in the well. Couple stops later, I had another keeper, and by 10 o'clock I've got 3. I'm pretty close to where I was the day before, minus a 6-pounder, which was a total gift, and I'm not expecting to catch another one. And I'm feeling pretty good. I really was. Things were clicking. I'm like, man, it's going to happen. And I hit a brick wall at that point. At 11 o'clock when I've still got 3. At noon when I've still got 3. At 1 when I've still got 3. Finally, a little after 1, I'm like, something's got to give. I need to just go to a place on this lake that has tons of fish and try to catch some keepers, and maybe I'll catch a 2.5-pounder. And that was Turkey Creek. And I went back in there and was able to catch a keeper pretty quick, and that settled me down, and that fish was on a bladed jig up shallow on a pole dock, and then just worked through there and ended up catching a couple more, culling one time. And that was my day. That big first day, and then just having 10 pounds, I've brought myself back down to having 2 good days.
There are big ones living here. I mean, it's not impossible to catch a good one in here.
The Bassmaster Elite Series Winning Ways is brought to you by Toyota, Yamaha, Skeeter Boats, and by Power Pole.
There's number 1. You're right where you're supposed to be. Sometimes on these still mornings, they'll bite a jerkbait when they won't bite something winding. He's a fatty.
We go to the 3rd day, and things aren't even better, maybe even worse conditions-wise.
They really were, because on that 3rd day, the front has totally passed. Some wind really gets those fish to fire. I mean, it just does. And yeah, that final day was just totally slick. And I knew from the start, so the first 2 days, I had locked myself kind of in the mid-lake section. I had from no higher than Louisville and really not much lower than Concord area on the lake. That was what was best for me in practice. And that lake fish is very sectionalized. There'll be a section of the lake that turns on. That final day, I'm like, I'm cutting loose the reins. I'm not going to lock myself in this section. The upper end was totally dead for whatever reason, so I knew I wasn't going to spend any time up there. But I was going to spend some time down on the lower end where I really hadn't yet in the tournament, from the dam back up all the way to Louisville, but I was going to spend some time on that dam to Concord section of the lake. And that was where I went down there pretty early in the day, caught a couple keepers on a jerkbait that morning. Not big fish, but at least something to get my day started. Hit a bunch more places, fished a lot of history, caught a few small fish, and then pulled up on that dock.
Stay on there, baby. Thank you, Keith Poche. He told me yesterday before the weigh-in about this spot.
Well, when you think about it, I mean, the Mercury move of the tournament, it has to be this move you made, this move at the critical part of the final day. You go over to this set of boat docks, which admittedly you say you've fished them many times before, but not until Keith Poche informed you that some really good keepers could be found there. Well, did you know that that was the trigger to pull? That was the move to make, and that is our Mercury move of the tournament.
Stay on there. Yes! Dude, that's a good one right there.
No, I think those fish may have would have been a spinnerbait as well, but a bladed jig is just so castable, and you can really get it, you know, right down the side of stuff like that extremely well, and it's a really natural profile. You know, I would have had to play around with the blades on the spinnerbait, whether it's a double wheeler or a tandem or whatever I needed to figure out. Where the bladed jig, you don't have that option. You just tie it on and throw it. You know, you can change the trailer on it, but that's about it.
Yes!
I know you had a little help specifically with that location, with that boat dock right there, but a lot of it too, it has to be experience, time on that particular body of water right there.
Absolutely, you know, a lot of history on that lake, and even on that particular dock where I caught them. I've caught them there before, just never this time of year. I've caught them there a lot in the summer and in the fall. Those fish will really school under that particular set of docks for whatever reason. I think it's out there, it catches some current. And yeah, those fish will definitely set up on it. So when I got that tip from Keith and he mentioned there being some fish
Keith
out
Poche
there.
told you about that.
That's right. And when he mentioned that, I'm like, well, it makes pretty good sense. He's not telling me something that's off the wall that couldn't be, you know. So so that was why I certainly put a little stock in it.
Oh, thank you, Jesus. I knew there'd be one on that pipe eventually.
When I pulled up there, it was a deal like, hey, I'll spend 5 or 10 minutes here. I'm gonna buzz down this thing quick. If something happens, then I'll spend a little more time. If not, I'm out of here.
Yeah, and then even after you stayed sort of in the air, but you kept catching them. And at what point did you know, I think I got this thing locked down?
I really, fishing that dock, I never felt like I did. It was, you know, I caught a 4.5, and then I caught a 4, and I ended up catching a 3.5 there, and I had a good solid bag, 16 plus pounds. And Robbie Floyd had come and showed up, and that's always a good sign.
Oh yeah.
When On the Water reporter Robbie Floyd comes about 1 o'clock on the final day of the Classic, you're probably doing good, but we had enough time left, and I honestly felt like there would be a bite late because the south wind was actually supposed to start blowing a little bit more. And I left that marina with probably an hour and a half's fishing time left. I'd milked it over back and forth, and I tell my cameraman, I'm like, I got one more stop to make. And from right there, at Concord to run back up to Knoxville, it was about a 25, 26 minute run. And I had to be in at 3:40. And I pulled up over there at 10 till 3 on that particular point. And I'd just work my way around it nice and slow. And at 2:59, when I caught a 4-pounder on that lipless crankbait, that was the fish that I felt like I could do it then.
Yeah, thank you, Jesus. I wasn't sure if I had a bass or a drum. 4-pounder. Ah! Let's do this thing.
You dreamed of it. Everybody that wins the Classic has dreamed of it since they were a little one. But getting to run through all your toolbox, you know. having a great day, having a challenging day, being
Yes.
able to engineer a turnaround.
Yes.
That's got to make it all the more satisfying.
It really does, you know, and I mean, I just give God all the glory for that. I'm very thankful. And looking back, it's so easy to see. I didn't need to have a big second day. I needed to have an open mind. I needed to be humbled on that second day to go out and be able just to fish, just to go fishing, you know, and that was exactly what I needed, was to just to have that clarity of mind, not have the pressure. I didn't have anything to lose, had everything to gain. And yeah, definitely very thankful for the way it worked out, and to get to enjoy all that moment there with my family, you know, with Jenny and the kids up on stage, made it just that much sweeter.
Very emotional, so much fun
Yes.
to watch, and just masterfully done all the way through. DeFoe, congratulations.
Tommy, thank you.